Senator from Illinois.
Ask consent the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
And I ask unanimous consent that the following morning business on Thursday, March 22nd, the Senate resume consideration of H.R. 3606, that the time until 12:30 p.m. be equally divided between the two leaders or their designees, that at 12:30 p.m. the post-cloture time be considered expired, and the Senate proceed to vote on the following. Read number 1931, Merkley number 1844 as amended if amended, and passage of H.R. 3606 as amended if amended. That there be 2 minutes equally divided in the usual form in between the votes, that upon disposition of H.R. 3606, the Senate then proceed to the consideration of the House message to accompany S-2038, the Stock Act, that there be 4 minutes of debate equally divided in the usual form prior to the vote on the motion to invoke cloture, on the motion to concur in the House message to accompany S-2038, that if cloture is invoked in the motion to concur, that all post-cloture time be yielded back, the motion to concur with an amendment be withdrawn, and the motion to concur be agreed to, that the motions to reconsider relative to the above items be considered made and laid upon the table, and that all after the first vote be 10-minute votes.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to a period of morning business with the Senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the following disposition of the House message to accompany S-2038, the Stock Act. The Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations on block, calendar number 441, 462, and 463. That there be 2 minutes for debate equally divided in the usual form. That upon the use or yielding back of time, the Senate proceed to vote without intervening action or debate on calendars number 441, 462, and 463 in that order. The motions to be reconsidered, the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate. That no further motions be in order, that any related statements be printed in the record, that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to S-Res 403, submitted earlier today.
The clerk will report.
S-Res 403, to authorize testimony, document production, and legal representation in United States versus Richard F. Dickey Scruggs.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, and any statements placed in the record as if read.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that H.R. 306 be discharged from the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources and referred to the Committee on Environment and Public Works.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent there be printed as a Senate document a compilation of materials from the Congressional Record and tribute to Senator Barbara Mikulski, and that members have until Thursday, March 29th to submit such tributes.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, the Senate adjourn until Thursday, March 22nd at 9:30 a.m., that following the prayer and pledge, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, the morning hour be deemed expired, and the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day. That following any leader remarks, the Senate be in a period of morning business for 1 hour with Senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with time equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees, with the majority controlling the first half and the Republicans controlling the final half. Following morning business, the Senate resumed consideration of H.R. 3606, the IPO bill. Further, that the filing deadline for second-degree amendments to the Reid motion to concur with respect to S-2038, the Stock Act, be 10:30 a.m. on Thursday.
Without objection.
There will be a series of up to 7 roll call votes tomorrow, beginning at 12:30 p.m., including completion of the IPO bill, the Stock Act, and confirmation of 3 judicial nominations. And if there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it adjourn under the previous order following the remarks of Senators Wyden and Landrieu.
Without objection. Senator from Oregon.
President, I ask unanimous consent to vacate the quorum call.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I've been able to listen a bit to the wonderful tributes of the last few hours to Senator Mikulski. We all know of her wonderful service all these years, the record that is being shattered, a very special record. And I was struck as I listened to some of the comments that tributes usually come in the United States Senate when one of our colleagues is leaving office, or sometimes one of our colleagues passes away. And what I'm struck by this afternoon is how glad I am, and colleagues on both sides of the aisle are, that Senator Mikulski is very much alive. And next week and next month and in the years ahead, she is going to continue to bring this kind of wellspring of conscience and energy and passion and expertise to the United States Senate. And I'm going to have more to say in terms of a lengthier speech, but she and I have had a special relationship for really almost 3 decades. We served together in the other body on the Energy and Commerce Committee. We would often show up at meetings together, and this is still a tradition that continues now because we both have the honor of serving on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And Senator Mikulski and I would walk in together, and she would smile, and she said, "Now the long and short of it are arriving." And I guess that's true in a literal sense, but while Senator Mikulski may be modest in stature, she has one very large record on behalf of the public interest. And I'm especially grateful for all that she has done for people without power and people without clout. When we think about what has so angered the American people, and I've heard the senator from Colorado, the president of the Senate, talk about this, is people feel so disconnected from government that you can have a community meeting in Oregon or Colorado or Maryland or some other part of the country, and somehow there's this sense that what goes on in Washington really has nothing to do with people in their home communities. Well, Senator Mikulski doesn't practice public service that way. Senator Mikulski has always felt, since the days when she was a community organizer and they were dealing with those community problems and where you were going to locate a freeway or something of that nature, she always felt that public service and community service was always about being connected to people. She understood right away what people may say at a town hall meeting now in Colorado or Oregon about government being removed from their lives, and for decades she has practiced a very different kind of public service. And she did it when she was a community organizer. She did it in the House of Representatives. She continues to do it today. Very often when we take the subway to a vote and I ask her what she's done over the weekend, she'll talk about fishing families. She knows that I was co-director of the Gray Panthers for many years before I was elected to Congress. So we'll talk about aging issues, and everybody knows what she's done in the aging field and her interest in fighting Alzheimer's. So it always comes back to people and that connection that she brings to public service that is so lacking from what Americans see is the big problem in government today, that much of what goes on here is simply disconnected from their lives. And I think what I see in Barbara Mikulski is the real measure of what we want in a public servant. We want someone who's conscientious. We want someone who's smart. We want someone who's got good values, and someone who always tries to be a coalition builder. I've watched Senator Mikulski in lots of instances. We had one just recently where Senator Mikulski was trying to find a balance on a difficult and contentious issue between industry and the environment, and I watched how she was trying to listen to both sides. Maryland's got some communities where they've got older plants, and if she can't take steps to protect those plants and have the workers keep their jobs, a lot of people are going to hurt. And Senator Mikulski always tries to keep that from happening. But she also said clean air and the environmental laws are important. And that last quality of trying to bring people together, I've heard the senator from Colorado talk about it, is what Senator Mikulski's public service career has been all about. So tonight and through the day, we've heard colleagues, pay tributes. I made mention of the fact that so often I hear these tributes when a colleague is leaving the United States Senate. I just want to close these brief remarks by saying that I'm especially grateful, and the cause of good government is enhanced by the fact that Senator Mikulski is very much alive. This is not a tribute to someone who's leaving office. This is a tribute to someone who's going to be here next week, next month, in the years ahead, continuing to shatter those records as she advocates for people who don't have big lobbies, who don't have lots of political clout and can't go out and hire PR firms and well-paid and well-tailored advocates to walk the halls of the United States Senate. She's there for those people who don't have a voice. She's been there for those people ever since she was a community organizer in those early days in Baltimore. And when I think about trying to give public service a good name, I think about Barbara Mikulski, our wonderful friend, Senator Barbara Mikulski, the senior senator from the state of Maryland. We thank her for giving public service a good name. We thank her for taking on the battles and the fights that she has in the past. And we're all especially grateful that at the end of this tribute, she will be back at her post, a few seats from me, standing up for those values and standing up for those causes that are so important to the well-being of this country. Madam President, with that, I yield the floor. I would note the absence of a quorum, and I think our distinguished colleague from Louisiana, Senator Landrieu, is on her way. And with that, Madam President, I would note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka.
President,
The senator from Louisiana.
are we in a quorum call?
We are.
I'd like to ask unanimous consent to dispense with a quorum call.
Without objection.
Madam President, I rise to speak, and I may be the last speaker of the day, but I did not want to leave the chamber or the building without taking a moment to come to the floor, as so many of our colleagues did today, to honor one of our own, one of our favorites. Not only is she a favorite to us, but I'm certain, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that she is one of the favorite senators ever to represent the state of Maryland. She is respected, she's beloved, and she's admired by millions of her constituents from Maryland, but I can promise you that is true of constituents in Louisiana, potentially in your home state, Madam President, and really throughout the world. Last Saturday, our friend and colleague, Senator Barbara Mikulski of Maryland, became the longest-serving woman in the history of the U.S. Congress. And I can only say that we've come a long way since the first woman was appointed. As I recall, back in the 1920s, she was only allowed to serve one day and was not going to be given a paycheck, but insisted that she be paid for her service. I think she might have been paid $1 for her service, and of course the record of that one day on the floor speaks for itself. We've come a long way since that day. But Barbara Mikulski was first elected to the U.S. House in 1976 and then to the U.S. Senate 10 years later. When she first entered this chamber, there was only one other woman here, her friend and her good, strong, supportive colleague, Nancy Kassebaum, a Republican from Kansas. So a Democrat from Maryland and a Republican from Kansas, but the two of them were quite a team, and Barbara Mikulski speaks fondly of her days with Senator Nancy Kassebaum. Today now there are 17 of us, and proudly we continue that tradition of respect and bipartisanship set in large measure by two of the women that we greatly admire. The late Representative Edith Norris Rogers of Massachusetts, who served from 1925 to 1960, had previously held the record for the longest-serving woman in Congress. Breaking this record is only one of the many milestones Senator Mikulski has accomplished during her tenure in the Senate. But as she would so quickly say, Madam President, it's not how long you serve, but it's how well you serve. It's not the length of your service, as she said to us so many times, but the quality of your service. We could not have a better role model in terms of effectiveness, strength, tenacity, courage, boldness than in our own Senator Barbara Mikulski. She was the first female Democrat, the first in the history of our country, to serve in both chambers of Congress, the first female Democrat to be elected to the Senate without succeeding a husband or a father, and the first female to chair an Appropriations Committee. Now, I serve on the Appropriations Committee. It's one of the most powerful committees in our Congress. When I think about that it took us over 225 years for a woman to get the gavel on just one of the 14 subcommittees. That number has changed over the decades, but if you think about it, from the beginning of our country's history, those early days, through the expansion out west, through the Civil War, post-Civil War history, the early part of the 1900s, World War I, World War II, never did a woman hold a gavel to write one budget for one committee in the entire country until Barbara Mikulski received one of those gavels. And I can tell you from personal experience serving with her on that committee, our country is a better place in health, in welfare, our space program, our science and technology programs, because Barbara Mikulski has used that gavel not to promote herself, but to promote the people that she serves and the principles that she fights for. She is well respected for her wisdom, for her tenacity, and her strength. She's respected by female and male peers that serve with her. As most of my female colleagues in the Senate have also experienced, Senator Mikulski took me under her wing when I was the first woman sworn in to a full term as a United States Senator from Louisiana. She extended her hand to help me in every way possible, to help me find my footing here as a senator, and to navigate through the intricacies of the Senate process. She was never too busy to put out a helping hand or a pat on the shoulder. She was always willing to give that extra advice, and I might say, was always willing to suggest that you might have made a mistake, try it a little different way the next time. Not one to mince words, but as a good big sister would take us under her wing and help us out, as any good big sister would do. In addition to that wonderful, helpful, and thoughtful gesture that she shared with me and so many, she has been an inspiration to many women, particularly young women that have looked up to her, trying to follow in her footsteps. So in conclusion, I can only say that this Senate and this Congress, the people of Maryland, the people of our country, and women throughout the world have been really blessed by her leadership. What has touched me, I guess, the most about watching her is the fearlessness in which she serves. She just doesn't back down. She knows herself. She's comfortable in her own skin. She doesn't try to be someone that she's not. She's very proud of her Polish-American background, always proud to talk about the bakery that her parents owned, her immigrant background, and always so willing to share, really from her heart as well as her mind, some of the things that she believes in. She's been nothing but an inspiration to me and to many. So I'm so glad that I could come to the floor today. I'm so glad that I think almost every one of our colleagues has made it to the floor to honor her. And, you know, when God made Barbara Mikulski, he threw away the mold. I don't think there will ever be one like her. There most certainly isn't anyone in politics today that is like her. And that's good, to be unique in that way. She will be long remembered. I hope she'll serve here for many wonderful years to come. And I yield the floor.
The Senate stands adjourned under the previous order until 9:30 a.m. tomorrow.